Welcome, everyone, to the Eugene City Council meeting for work session for February 24th, and welcome to everyone here and everyone at home. The first item up is our committee reports and items of interest from the mayor, city council, and city manager. Since I had it already in my head last Monday, but I actually don't have it in my head very much today. So I just have a couple things that I will say. The Asian festival that happened this last weekend was wonderful. Lots and lots of people, lots of opportunity to see all the different cultural representations and art and music and everything that we have in our community that we are so rich to have. So that was really fun. And wanted you to know that yesterday I had the opportunity to give Lorraine Kerwood a Ruby Award from the Seroptimist for all the work that she does with Next Steps and the training that she does and recycling and the providing computers and other things for folks who don't have them. So that was fun. Went to Albany to meet with mayors from up and down the corridor on the electric vehicle charging station issues that we've been talking about. So that was really interesting. And then George and I did the mayor's one-on-one at Kiva yesterday, so that was fun. Thank you, George. And then I went over to Willamette High School last night to hear their wonderful jazz band. And what's the name of the singing group at Willamette? You remember that?
Sorry, it's been a few years, Mayor.
So well. Well, anyway, they were wonderful.
They are awesome, though.
Yeah, they were very awesome. So I appreciated the opportunity to be there, too.
Cosmic Pizza?
And what?
The Cosmic Pizza one?
Oh.
Yeah.
The only other thing I'm going to mention is that on Sunday, city manager and I are joining folks from the county and from the Springfield School District and Springfield and Lane Transit District and others in our annual United Front trip to go talk to our congressional delegation about our priorities. So that's up and coming, and we'll get to see how our objectives and goals are moving along at the federal level. So with that, Betty.
I've had orientation with two groups that I'm joining. The Workforce Partnership Board, which, well, actually I had orientation and went to a board meeting. And we'll go to another meeting tomorrow, and it seems very interesting and worthwhile. And yesterday I had an orientation with the McKinsey Watershed Director. I was on that some years ago, but brought me up to date on what's going on now. I was at the Asian Festival also. It was interesting and good food. I've had my first samosa. I think that's about it now. I wasn't really prepared today.
Okay, Andrea, how about you?
Thank you, Mayor. I can't say I was real prepared. I was looking at my calendar. I've been working a lot, so I really probably haven't been fulfilling all my council duties as well as I should be. But a couple things I just want to mention for upcoming events. The Project Homeless Connection, which is March 18th at the fairgrounds. I want to make sure we get that out as much as possible to the community. This weekend, the NAACP is having their fundraising dinner at Valley River Center. I'm hoping that some of us will be there. Also in the Bethel community, they're going to be doing a health screening to help kiddos get on the Oregon Health Plan if they're eligible. There's a real push. There's more money in that strand. So that'll be the 5th and 6th of March. They're doing outreach to folks in that community, but if there are other people in the city, I'm sure that they wouldn't turn anybody away if you don't have a child in Bethel. And then I just want to say that I really appreciated going over to eWeb. I feel like I really picked up a lot of good information, and it's really kind of exciting the things that our joint meeting with them was last Tuesday. I thought the staff did a really good presentation. There was some really good conversations and some pretty sentinel things that are changing with the steam plant going offline and how we are going to address helping them do that. So I think it was time well spent.
Chris?
Ditto what Andrea was saying about the UWeb meeting. I thought that was very good. I also went to the Asian celebration. I like to go to that every year. I think it's a great event, and was very pleased once again with how well it went. The city had great representation there, which I thought was very good. Not only the police, but also fire and the other city committees were also well represented.
Human Rights
Rights,
Commission.
human, yeah. And those are really the main things I have. LCOG's board meeting is this Thursday evening. It will be at eWeb, so that'll be good. Otherwise, so that's all I really have.
Alan?
I attended the Laurel Hill Valley Citizens meeting in Potluck. It was a great meal. We did it at the new Comfort Suites Hotel there in the Glenwood exit, in their nice community room, which is a really nice little community asset. And good turnout. The mayor was there as well. Because you were on the Laurel Hill Center for...
Yeah, but those are not really connected, so.
I know, but...
Yes. I was there because they invited me to come, and I thought I should go.
Good. Fairmont neighbors are meeting on March 10th at Laurel Hill Golf Course Community Room, 7 p.m. And I'll mention again, the Homeless Connect is on March 18th. It runs from 9 to 5, I believe, at the Convention Center. Right, 9 to 3, right.
I'll just interject. I think they're still looking for volunteers.
And they are looking for
anybody,
volunteers.
Yep.
And it's worth every effort you put in, you get back tenfold.
Yep.
Thanks. Jennifer?
I think George is on the line.
Oh, George. George?
Maybe not.
Maybe not.
Is he there?
I thought I heard. Hello?
He's probably
I think it's you.
he's checking
Okay,
a bag right now.
let's see, I attended a Metropolitan Wastewater Management Commission meeting, and they did a presentation on the completion of a bunch of capital projects that they had recently done, and they were all under budget, and so that was kind of exciting. And I attended an HSC meeting where we had a very interesting discussion on the on compression and how, it affects the municipalities and how it influences our decisions in terms of what types of ballot measures to go out for and how much to ask for. Then I saw in the City Council newsletter that the Public Works Department had received a grant for a seismic upgrade at Station 8, so that would evidently complete the seismic upgrades to all of the stations in Eugene, and Station 8 is out in my ward. I also attended the Asian celebration, and that was the first time I'd been in many years, and it was huge. It had really, really grown, and it was we had a really good time. And I appreciated their emphasis on kids, and they had a little passport that kids could fill out as they went to different stations, and so that was fun. And then so now that the Asian celebration's gone, the Lane County Fairgrounds now is host to the logging conference, and that's this weekend. And then on Saturday from 9 to 2, they have a lot of family fun and education activities in the Wheeler Pavilion, in addition to the high school forestry skills competition. And outside you can see a chainsaw wood carver Ryan Anderson. That's this Saturday at the fairgrounds.
All right. George?
Last Wednesday, I went to the Police Commission's Subcommittee on Use of Force Taser Policy Review meeting, and I believe that they're done. And tonight's meeting will be to formulate the final report, and format it and decide how they're going to, stick in. There will be some minority opinions apparently tacked on there. Just decide how they're going to move it on to the full police commission, and then we will look at it in the full police commission. And I imagine there, at some point, not in the not too distant future, we will be looking at it again here. And I'm not sure what format that will be in yet.
George, excuse me, that meeting was last night. I apologize.
Oh, it was last night.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Oh, okay. All right, so that's done. And the one-on-one yesterday was. That's why I wasn't at the meeting. It's at the one-on-one with the mayor at the Kiva Grocery downtown, and there were a lot of customers and not too many people stopping. I guess they were all too busy, had to get home and cook their dinners, so we didn't really talk to that many people. The people we did talk to were very interesting, and I thought it was very worthwhile, even though there weren't a lot of people. I'll just close with one idea that one of the women we talked to had been to Haiti for many years many times in the last 10, 15 years, and has come up with this idea of having a sister city program, perhaps in Haiti. And so we may be seeing an idea like that come across this body sometime in the not too far distant future. She's going to research it a lot. So, thank you.
The Public Outreach Subcommittee of the Police Commission came up with the idea of taking Police Commission meetings on the road. And so on the 11th, we had the Police Commission meeting at the Sheldon Community Center. And we had a very robust discussion around policy review process and protocol and how the appropriate chain of review for police processes take place. We had a wonderful speaker who talked about the preparation for the hate crimes panel that we're going to be doing in conjunction with the Human Rights Commission, I believe, on March 16th. And so there was kind of some brainstorming around how do we do that effectively. We also had an opportunity to hear from the chief, and I'd prefer to let him talk about what he said there in his regular report, but he said some things that I thought were really wonderful ways to make the system better, and some internal small changes he was making around how some of the lieutenants would be attending meetings regularly and making information flow within the department happen more quickly so that they'd be more responsive, and I thought some of that was really quite interesting. We then had the Use of Force Subcommittee as well talk about their schedule for the TASER stuff. Betty and I met with and supervised the auditor on the 16th, and one of the pieces that came out of that was something we wanted to bring forward to the council of how many times the auditor should plan to come to council to make a report per year. And kind of what we talked about is, I think we agreed on this, that since there were 3 kind of terms in the course of a year, that he should plan on making at least 1 formal report per term or 3 times a year, and then have 3 maybe on the side that he could, when an event surfaced that needed him to come and give us a specific report on a specific incident, so that we'd have him maybe up to a total of 6. Also appreciated the eWeb meeting. I thought that was very, very instructive and in such a wonderful location.
How restrained, if you might.
Well, since George brought up sister cities, before people start thinking too much about that, I've been probably the biggest booster of sister cities on this council for many years, and we have 4 sister cities. There was a time when there was a big move to get a Mexican sister city, and actually I probably still have a folder with material about all sorts of beautiful places, and Mayor Tory was offering to send me down to check them out, but
But only if you stayed for a long time.
no, the problem is, as much as I would have liked to do that, the problem is we've never adequately supported the relations with the 4 sister cities we have. Also, a few years ago, a woman from China sent me a lot of material about her city, saying we should have a sister city there, and I think it's all great, but until we start supporting the ones we already have, I don't think that people should get their hopes up about another one.
Andrew, do you have something to add to that?
Well, I do want to add to that, but I had something else I wanted to share. I thank you, Betty, for saying that. I would love to see a sister city in the Mexican arena, but I know that it's a two-way street.
Yeah.
And until we can go both ways, I think that I appreciate your words, and I would love to see us figure out a way to encourage that, but I'm sure it would cost money. And the only other thing I wanted to say, that when I was reading the paper this morning, I noticed that, and I didn't go to the LCOG dinner, I think it was, that Chief Groves and Chief Murphy were recognized, and I just want to say, it's really nice to have our staff recognized for going above and beyond, and in their course of the work that they do, it's good that the community has the opportunity to acknowledge them. That's true.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple things. Reminder, the Rail Summit on March 9th, and we really encourage people to attend that. That's really intended to be a regional plus, talking about all sorts of rail. And
We can all be there.
March 9th, and I'll send out some more detailed information. Pretty much all day it will be full, and kudos to Brenda and some others who have really spent a lot of time coordinating that. Good work. I also had a chance to attend the Asian celebration. Just want to thank the staff that were out there in a variety of ways and a variety of booths providing information. I'll be at the NAACP dinner this weekend also. And then just as a reminder, internally in the city, we are in full budget mode. So we will be periodically sending out information to the budget committee just to try to keep the budget committee in the loop on some things. And so, because there'll be a lot of good discussion this year. So just, we're kind of in that mode, so.
Just to wrap this part up with just a couple more things. At the mayor's one-on-one yesterday, there was an employee from Enterprise who came to the downtown, and she was, talking to us about how much she likes her job downtown, and evidently she's using Kiva to go to the store downtown. So she's moving around the downtown like we want people there to do. There was also a woman who came and spoke about the need for better lighting in the city, particularly in the Nora Kenzie Gillum area, and that she found it hard because the lights were street lights were so dim. So those are the kind of things people come in and talk to us about, a full range of things that are just things that people are concerned and care about in different wards of the city. So with that, we will move on to the next item on the agenda, and this one is our important work session on homeless camping. And before I turn it over to the city manager, not to put you on the spot, Andrew, but since this was your topic, I wondered if you wanted to say a few words to launch this, and then I will go to staff.
Well, I thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity. So I was contacted by a community member who had concerns about the way that the ORS is written for people sleeping in their cars. And so, I did, we got it on our agenda. I don't remember whether or not we did a poll. I'm sorry, my mind doesn't remember everything. But I'm really glad to be having this discussion because I think this is something that we need to revisit yearly. I think this is an ongoing situation that we haven't got the answer to yet. And if we can tweak any system a little bit one way or the other to help a few people, have a better quality of life that don't have a place to live, I think that it's part of our responsibility as leaders to address those. And so that's kind of what my thoughts were, Mayor.
Thank you. City Manager, I'll turn it over to you now.
Thanks, Mayor, and Richie and Pete.
There he is.
I'll turn it over to either one of you to start us off.
Is this for this one?
Not for us.
Okay, well then I'm moving back to the center.
I can do like hand puppets. Yeah. So good afternoon. In response to a request from City Council, as you know, we've been asked to discuss the city's role with regard to homeless camping. And homelessness is a continuing, growing concern of the community. On January 27th, 3,971 homeless people were counted in Lane County. And on that one-day snapshot, 2,541 of our neighbors were unsheltered. While the numbers were significantly increased from last year, partially due to better counting, the nearly 4,000 homeless people are real, and we know that we didn't include everybody in that count. It's not a complete count, but it's the best we could do. So Eugene has been confronted with illegal camping issues for decades, and the original and classic enforcement model, which involved a proactive police response, proved to be unsatisfactory. It was time-consuming, confrontational, and really frustrating for all the parties involved. So Eugene works hard to find a balance between the needs of our most vulnerable residents and the health and safety concerns of property owners and tenants. We've helped to create and support programs such as the First Place Family Development Center and the Eugene Service Station, and we're a key partner in events such as Project Homeless Connect, which I appreciate the plug from several of you already, coming up on March 18th. So a dozen years ago, a council committee recommended kind of a short-lived experiment that allowed camping in industrial areas in an effort to draw it away from residential areas. The current program replaced it, and its success surprises even those of us who conceived it, quite frankly. We have a contract with St. Vincent de Paul. I'd like to acknowledge their staff person, in the back row here, who's in the audience. He manages the legal spaces, and he's the first responder when there's complaints about on-street camping. And he also is employed by St. Vincent de Paul at the Eugene Service Station, so a lot of people know him. And to my left, Lieutenant Pete Deshpande will kind of describe how it all works, and then we can answer questions.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm Pete Deshpande. I'm a lieutenant with the Patrol Division. And I think Richie covered all the salient points. I'd just like to say that for us in the police department, it's really a kind of a balance between compassion and enforcement. And so the system as it's set up now, and you probably know how this works, is if we get a complaint in, and in fact it is complaint generated, first line of defense is to go to St. Vincent de Paul. And again, Keith sitting back there does a tremendous job of this. He has quite a bit of trust with the community, and so that's a big plus for us. Keith is able to deal with these situations very effectively. If he can't get through to some folks, then he relays that information to us. We have officers that go out and make contact, and usually that resolves the issue. Very, very rarely do we end up issuing a citation or towing somebody's vehicle. That's extremely rare. And so again, for us, the essence is the compassion versus enforcement. Having said that, I'm reminded that I've received a couple of phone calls from other agencies in California and such, asking us about this partnership arrangement, and they'd like to emulate something along that line that works so well for us. It's not perfect. Sometimes we get complaints, and then people call again and again. And I'll be the first to admit sometimes these things fall through the cracks, but we do everything we can. And by and far, I think it's very successful.
Okay. Ready for questions, huh? Discussion. So I've got Mike and Andrea in the queue. Mike?
Thank you very much. I appreciated your characterization that enforcement wasn't. How did you say that again, Richard?
Well, I'd say it was in the old days, you mean?
Yeah.
I would say it was adversarial, and it was unsatisfactory, and what you had was, I think you'd agree, the police were chasing people around. It was spending a lot of their time. And
right. Not the best way, best use of police time.
It was difficult in all respects.
Scarce resources, absolutely.
God will.
And I know that I had a complaint from a constituent about something similar that occurred recently within the last couple of weeks that went on for a considerable length of time before they were able to help those folks who were camping in the front of a commercial space, actually. And so I guess I would say that I appreciate the newer model, and I appreciate how it works and our compassionate way of dealing with that. I hope that we can be as responsive as possible. I know that's sometimes difficult, but I have had a couple of complaints for that. But more than anything, since we know the numbers are what they are, I'm interested in looking for answers of how we can address this by being creative. And I thought that Majeska, who I see sitting back there, had some really great ideas the other day during the public forum on Monday when she mentioned how perhaps we could look at relaxing or being a bit more accommodating with how we restrict private property owners who want to be a part of the solution. And so could you kind of speak to the impacts of that, the process, if we wanted to I don't know if you heard her remarks the other night.
I didn't, but I'll give it a good shot.
I'd love to hear your comments on how do we do that.
When the ordinance was adopted about a dozen years ago, the idea behind it was there was the on-street camping part, which we talked about just now, but there was also the part that legalized camping in certain conditions. And the idea was to help get out of the way of neighbors helping each other.
Right.
So if a church wanted to let somebody stay on their property, we let them do it, or a business, or even a property owner wanted to do it. And part of the deal was there'd be no rent charged. There couldn't be a rent charge because we didn't want to have it get into a tenant-landlord situation where if there was a problem, you couldn't evict somebody. And you wanted to have some rules about sanitation, there would be a restroom available, and garbage and that sort of thing, because those are the kinds of things that would create significant conflicts with neighbors. And so the ordinance as it stands says that a business or a public agency or a church can have up to 3 campers on their property if sanitation is provided, and a property owner can have 1 on their property. We don't track all of them. We only hear about them if there's a complaint. In terms of the churches and the businesses, some of them contract with St. Vincent de Paul to manage those spaces, and some of them just do it on their own. And those we don't hear about, that works great. And we know that they're out there. And every now and then, our land use folks do get a complaint about a situation. And what I understand is most times they're able to resolve it. But if you wanted to relax that more and allow somebody to have more than 1 camper on their property, that would take an ordinance change.
Okay.
Is that what you were looking for?
Oh, well, kind of. I'm sorry that you didn't hear her comments, and we can't go through that again, but there were a couple of good suggestions there. I'd be more interested, perhaps maybe in memo form later, in hearing from you on some follow-up with that, or what parts of the ordinance we could tweak in a way that would be meaningful and helpful. I think that that's the best kind of solution that I'm interested in, which is giving more tools to allow neighbors to help neighbors. Thanks.
Okay, Andrea?
Well, Mike pretty much spoke to a lot of the stuff that I was going to comment on. I guess what I would like to do at this point then is just kind of offer, how can we encourage more folks to sign up for the spaces that are monitored, Richie?
I think the real challenge is getting more spaces. And so if you know of an organization or an individual or that might be willing to offer a space, that's really the best deal out there. I mean, because our experience has been that people who are in a space, for the most part, behave pretty well. That they really like the idea of being able to not be illegal, and there have been some problems, but mostly, by and large, they aren't. We just don't have enough of them, and the number of people on the streets seems to be increasing. So finding more spaces, that's the challenge. And
And if people wanted to sign up for that program, they would contact you?
they can contact me, or they contact St. Vincent de Paul.
Okay.
Which would be even better.
And so I guess the gist of my,
I do have the numbers.
okay, if you want to go ahead and say them.
Well, St. Vincent de Paul's main number is 687-5820.
Okay.
And that would be a good place. They can contact me, 682-5533.
Okay.
And I'll connect them. And I'll say that we will support those spaces. We're providing portable toilets for them and so on. So there's some support behind
There's
it.
some benefit if you have the opportunity to house people on your property or on your business. There's a benefit to it because they're not only monitored, but there's also porta potties provided.
For businesses, not
business.
for individual
Oh, not for
properties,
individuals.
but
How about for churches?
Churches, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's really good. I mean, if people had the desire to do that. And I really do appreciate the change in genre of the philosophy of the police department wanting to, have more compassion. I am challenged, when I was on the school board, we'd hear of stories, and I'm sure Chris heard some too, of kids getting picked up at cars, by bridges. And it always kind of breaks your heart to think that we have children that are living under these situations. It's not right. So sleeping in cars is complaint-driven when folks have a complaint. And those are lower-level situations where, cops don't come code 3. They if they have a chance in their 8 hours, they'll respond. So what kind of options do you give people if their cars are broken down, though? I mean, that's kind of the thing that I've seen when I drive around the industrial part of town, because that's, my area. What do we do then?
And to address the first part, you're exactly right. The focus for us really as a department is on property crimes. That's number one, and of course downtown issues. And so as time and call load permits, we deal with other things obviously as well. And so to answer the second part of your question, again, Keith Heath, he really is the man when it comes to this because he makes the first contact and provides them with a list of options and opportunities and so forth. By the time we get involved as an agency, it's come to the point where Keith, through all his magic, cannot, find a place for folks, or they just absolutely refuse and so forth, and then we get involved.
Okay, so it's kind of like a three-prong thing, the complaint, and then Keith, and then you all.
Yeah, we're the absolute last effort, yes.
And so I'm really interested to hear, what other things we can do within the ordinance, but I'm also cognizant of the fact that we don't want to change an ordinance that the police department will have challenge enforcing, or that it makes it too lax so that you don't have the work that the tools that you need to do the work that you do. So I'm curious if there's a policy review on this that needs to be done, if that's something we can ask the police commission to look at, in accordance with the ordinance piece, so that it goes kind of hand in hand, so that one, part isn't, doing something and then the other part isn't reflective of what we want. So
Work together on that, sure.
Okay. And I guess that is it. And I just wanted to also mention that I don't know if the other councilors had an opportunity to see it or not, but Lane County put out the stats on their homeless count, and it's pretty interesting. The one thing that, and this was 08, I think, but 09, but that one of the things I wanted just to point out in the attachment B that we got was that it said here that 95% of the people who are homeless, their last permanent residence was in Lane County. So take that how you want it. If it was a motel on Highway 99, it still was their last permanent residence. And so I think that's just kind of reflective of our community.
I've got Chris and Ellen in the queue, but before that, I just wanted to follow up on the needing more spaces and the desire to have. First of all, I'd like to say that I think it's been our policy and continues to be our policy that we think the number one way to address this is to get people into permanent housing. That is the goal. That's what we aim for all the time in terms of our low-cost housing projects and other strategies. The other strategy we use is to try to help people from becoming homeless when they're on the edge and about to fall through. Save a lot if you don't let them get there. So those are the two main strategies, right? I think, Richie.
Yes.
And but in terms of needing more spaces, I wondered if there was a role for the Human Rights Commission to do some outreach, some targeted outreach to see if we can generate some more interest in adding some sites. Sometimes just saying we're available is not enough. You have to go shake the trees a little bit and see if people are willing, and that might be a really nice outreach role. So just to think about that. And the other thing that I know that has come up recently is, this is with kids, is Looking Glass has their new roads facility on 7th, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a house next to that they've been interested in acquiring, but it needs upgrades to get to our permit standards. And I think we would all want that for kids, because you want it, if it's going to be there where the kids are going to be, you want it to be a safe place for them to be. The question is there some way that we can bring together the right people or approach it in a collaborative way like we do with our other low-cost housing things to see if that might deal with a couple things at the same time. It might provide a larger place for young people to go. It might move them from some places that are less desirous for them to be, just a place that is hopefully better. So just maybe that's something for us to see if we can. I know they were interested in CCBG funds,
CDBG,
but you don't. But you can't use those unless you meet certain standards. And so I understand that's more complex than just wanting. But I do think that they already have a pretty wonderful facility, and if there's opportunity to add to that in a way that somehow we can facilitate, given that we don't have any cash rolling around. But I just wanted to put that out there, because if there's anything that I find totally unforgivable, is having underage kids out on our streets with no adult responsible for them. So it stays in been working on that for more years than I like to talk about, but it's still as bad as it's ever been. So any strategies that we can employ, I'm there. Okay, Chris, you're next.
Thank you. I'm extremely appreciative of the effort to try to be even-handed in how we approach it, because this is not a simple bumper sticker kind of problem. And for me, the clarity, what really helps me a lot is to recognize that what we're really dealing with is both a condition and a behavior, and that the approach you need to take needs to be defined on whether you're dealing with the condition or whether you're dealing with the behavior. And I think I receive complaints just like we all do, and most of the time, the vast majority of the complaints are not about the condition of homelessness. I don't get people calling and saying, I'm angry because somebody's homeless, or I'm angry because somebody is in their vehicle. I occasionally get that, but mostly that's not what it is. Mostly it's they are acting in a certain way. And so I think that's really the focus for what we need to try to get some impact on, because I think that's what people are getting confused about, is they're mixing the condition of homelessness with the behavior of certain people, and that brush gets very broad and starts to paint a lot of people that don't really deserve to be painted. And I agree we need to be as compassionate as we can possibly be about a condition that many people have no control over. But we also need to be as thoughtful and deliberate as we can about behaviors that we or other folks don't find acceptable. And a lot of those behaviors are not being committed by people who are homeless. Some of those behaviors are being committed by people who have a place to go to every night. But the behavior is still unacceptable. And I think as long as we can keep clear in our minds what the real issues are and what we really need to focus on, I think we can really get the traction we want. And so all the efforts we're trying to do around the condition of homelessness, I think, are great. And we really need to try to continue those as much as we can, while at the same time trying to figure out how we can manage those behaviors that are not acceptable to you or to me or actually to a lot of people within the community because they are in as much peril as anyone else from their own neighbors, if you will. And so I really appreciate the effort that's evolved over the years, recognizing that that dynamic is going on. And I agree with the mayor and others that finding homes or shelter for people whose condition could be life-changing as a result of doing that is a real goal. That's what we want to get to. And then figuring out strategies to manage the behavior, whether it's in downtown or in other parts of town, I think are really key to having the best, most balanced approach. And I really appreciate you get that. You really do. And that's, I think, why we keep moving forward. But if increasing the space availability for some of these folks can get some of that apparent problem out of the way, it's just going to really benefit everybody. So I think that's a good thing.
Alan?
I think the model that we have works pretty well. It works better than it used to, for really clear to me. And the work that St. Vincent de Paul does is great work. Actually, I've heard, we never met, but I've heard of you, Heath. So you're kind of a legend around here, I think. And thank you for the hard work that you do. It's really important. Homelessness is a big problem. 4,000 of our people being homeless is too high. And the mayor mentioned it, but it's Housing First is the program, right? Can you explain that a little bit more and how that works?
I think the concept that is kind of the national best practice and it's kind of accepted as being what works the best is if you can move people directly from homelessness into housing with services. And that the shelter system is the most expensive service and it has probably the poorest outcomes for the money. And so getting people into housing is really critical. The challenge is, well, here we go. It's expensive. You want supportive housing. Somebody who's got a significant problem needs more than just a roof over their head sometimes. Some of them is fine. Others, the kind of people who have behaviors that really cause the police response, cause some of the problems downtown that you hear about the most, they need treatment programs to go with their housing. So sometimes people call it wet housing or they call it permanent supportive housing. And the cost of that is expensive. It might be $1,200 to $2,000 a month. But on the other hand, you have people like that who are going into the emergency room spending $300 a night, or the jail, $300 or $400 a night, or the Johnson unit, $1,000 a night, and they're typically there 7 to 10 days. And so there's a huge cost to the community to not house those folks, and a huge benefit to housing them, but moving the money around, that's a big challenge. So that's one of the things that's part of your downtown safety, opportunities, is to look for some housing for some of those frequent flyers.
Yeah. Some of the stats that were in the memo and the stat sheet were pretty troubling, and some of them I didn't understand why they'd gone up so much. Like, for instance, chronic homelessness in 2006, just 4 years ago, was that 16% of the homeless were chronic homeless, and today it's 50%. Right. And nationally, it's only like 10%.
Well, I bet it's going up nationally too. But I think part of that is the economics of the community, that people are homeless and they're staying homeless longer. We still have a very low vacancy rate in terms of housing, so there's a lot of competition for housing, especially at the lower end. And when I talk to property managers, and I've done that recently, some of the larger companies, the vacancies are all at the high end for the most part, the most expensive units. The low end, there's huge competition and people can't get into them, and they have limited resources, and so they just end up, once you're on the street, it's really hard to turn that around. And so I think people have just become chronically homeless after a period of time. And I'm rambling, but I helped do the one-night shelter count at the dining room. And I talked to people who were just been homeless for a really long time. A lot of them, it had become just a way of life. I think it's going to be hard to turn that around.
Yeah, and there are resources like the St. Vincent de Paul Homeless Center on 99, and
day resources, right?
Yeah, during the day, right.
They're really valuable.
And the number of households eligible for subsidized housing increased twofold since 1990, and it's 20,000 households as of 2000. So that was a decade ago. It's probably a lot more than that today. And only a quarter of them, less than a quarter, 4,500 of them, according to stats, get that subsidy.
Correct.
So that's just a matter of the appropriation from Congress. What can we do to, I mean, we're not even addressing a quarter of them. So, and is this something we're going to be addressing at our
I think that's
trip
probably
to
a
DC?
conversation for your legislative committee.
Well, do you have any ideas about how that number goes up? Put you on the spot, Richie.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I would just say that the dealing with housing, the cost of subsidizing housing is way beyond the capability of local governments or even state governments.
This is all federal money.
The amount of money is so great to provide subsidy for that kind of population. It needs to come from a source that can deficit spend, I guess, or change its priorities dramatically. And so, historically, the problem really began in the 80s when the HUD budget was cut by so great, 87%, and it's never really recovered from that. And so, when there's a national priority to provide housing for people again, we can get a better handle on that problem.
Yeah,
There's a lot of small problems, but that's the biggest one.
I would hope that when we go back on the United Front trip, that some of these statistics about Lane County are just are startling. That would be one of the points that we bring up to our legislative contingent back there. Yet you've been able to create since '89, which is most of your career here, almost 2,000 housing units of low-income housing all over the city, kind of distributed, too, all over the place.
We have great partners, St. Vincent de Paul, Metropolitan Affordable Housing, HAXA, and great collection of partners that have done a remarkable job, better than, nobody's done it better.
And they work fast.
And they've done, but there's limited resources.
And that's almost 2,000. The last stat that was troubling to me was that 1,800 homeless children in our schools, about 900, over 900 of them are in our Eugene schools. That one was very troubling to me. You can't learn, you can't excel if you don't have a place to get clean and do your homework and be safe and have food. And so that goes back to housing first, which is why it's so important. The last question I had is regarding the parking spaces for homeless folks. Can a neighborhood association do that? Have any approached us trying to do that?
Not that I'm aware of, but if they have a space, we'd be interested in it.
So how would that work if a neighborhood association wanted to do
Well, I
that?
just think they need to identify a location. As long as it can't be on the street, because on-the-street camping is illegal right now. But if it's off the street, we've worked pretty creatively about different spaces around town. And we've had spaces on some of our land bank sites that have been used, and actually it's kept down vandalism, and businesses have let people on their property, and it's kept down theft because you got a set of eyes there keeping an eye on things. So there are options there. So if somebody has an idea, please contact us.
Okay.
That's what I'd say.
I'll work with my neighborhoods. Thanks.
So Pearl is here, and I wanted to give her an opportunity to make a comment if she would like to.
I just wanted to...
Can you come up to use a...
Use a mic.
This doesn't work, unfortunately. I'm pretty loud.
No, you
It's for
Not loud enough.
It's
Oh, it's a TV
It's
thing.
for the
Okay,
people
which I really
all the
need
way
more
up in
of.
Bethel.
Okay. Thank you for your seat, Richie. Okay. I just wanted to respond to some of the questions that you had around the count that I think are actually, some are encouraging and some are depressing, so I'll share a little bit of that. One is that in the count of 3,971 people, out of the count, 1,411 of them were in some kind of a shelter. The one-night homeless count is not just counting people who have no shelter, it counts people who are getting services in our community. And I want to say that the good news was we actually had more people getting some kind of rental assistance or emergency shelter or mortgage assistance or homelessness prevention than we did previously because we had the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act money. So I want to sort of explain the pieces a little bit. So 1,411 people were inside somewhere that night. Some of them long-term, some of them transitional, some of them emergency. So I want to say that. And then I also want to say that we added 23 new sites to this count. I mean, the problem with our fabulous staff over at the Human Services Commission is they want to get it better, and more accurate to speak on behalf of individuals and families that are homeless. And then what that also creates is that we're going to get more information for you. And so I think what we're going to do next year is just stay with these 92 organizations that we recruited and the 100 volunteers and staff that we have and put it against the count that we did this year more exactly. So it's a little bit different. And then I think and I want to agree that what troubles me deeply, having done the work directly and working for government now, is that we have so many people that are chronically homeless. And, Richie and I counted at the dining room that night. And what we've learned, because the community has wanted to respond to the chronically homeless, is that Egan Warming Center, Project Homeless Connect, we have unearthed the beginning of the depth of this problem. And my personal goal is to do something about it over the next year, like really focusing on that as the interjurisdictional staff person. And then the other thing I wanted to say is this will be the bad news. In the course of the year, that was a good. Well, there was good news in there. Yeah. I felt there was, Alan. Okay, so is that we collect data from all the nonprofits that we fund who do work on homelessness and other anti-poverty work. And what we found, and this was also in that release that you got, is that 11,513 households at some point during the year were homeless. Even if it was just a day, they went over to Food for Lane County and they got something, and in our system it said they were homeless that day. And I think that is the true magnitude of the problem. And what I like about the count is that it gives us an opportunity for conversation. A lot of you looked at that press release and took it really seriously. We got it out to you in addition to the press, and there's a lot of work to do. So that's what I will say.
So this gives me the opportunity for to say thank you and to thank all of St. Vinny's and all of you who work so hard on this. And it's not that we like hearing the news that we hear, but it's like the census. It's important. You can't respond until you know what you've got. So that's why it's so important. And we're so fortunate to have the people in our community who provide the high quality services that they do. So I just want to say thank you so much to you and St. Vinny's and everyone that is part of this partnership that tries to stem this tide. And we do have other good news, like VetLift is a good example of what you all were talking about in terms of wraparound services and helping people move from being chronically homeless to actually getting their lives together and moving forward. So appreciate it very much. I've got George, Brown, and Betty in the queue.
Thank you. I've got a couple questions for Richie. I mean, once again, gosh, these statistics just make you want to start crying. It just seems like more people step up to the plate every year, try to do something, and we keep falling farther behind. And I suppose that's inevitable, given the state of the economy, and it probably will be that way for a few more years, unfortunately. That's really disheartening, and obviously one of the main needs is affordable housing, and that's one thing we really haven't been talking a lot about at council the last few months, how to increase building more units like that. And are there anything in the works that we don't know about? I mean, I haven't heard of any.
Well, the one that's under
projects.
construction right now is there's a project on West 11th that's
right. Oh yeah,
11th
sure.
and Hayes, which
where
is
the,
called
right,
the
where
Land
St.
Building,
Vincent.
St. Vincent de
Yeah,
Paul,
yeah.
and we have a project on Willackenzie that'll become where the old Willackenzie School is. That's coming up in the queue. It's already been approved, and so
okay.
I think you all honestly can be extremely proud of yourselves that the Eugene City Council is second to none in your long-term support for subsidized housing and low-income housing. And there's not another community that does it any better than you, and it's because of the leadership of this group, really. So take credit for it. Is it enough? No, but it's not because of your lack of effort or the staff's lack of effort. It's a resource issue, and we do the best we can with what we got, and we got some great projects out there that people live in, and it dramatically changes the lives of the people who live in them. So for generations. So it's a great thing. Is it enough? No. Well, but I mean, it's not for lack of effort and
or skill.
Yeah, or skill. That's right. Well, whatever. We got a lot of good people on this, and so, but give credit where it's due. Right here at the table, you earned it.
Thanks, Richie.
Well, obviously, this problem we could spend probably. How many millions of dollars we could ever raise could go for affordable housing and homelessness prevention. Even it's like, what if we? But that won't happen. We don't have that kind of money. I mean, Eugene, budget's got its own problems.
It's a huge challenge. For
But
the
what
community.
if? I mean, what if something more modest, like $100,000 or $200,000 a year, could be made available? How would you prioritize that?
Homeless
If that
prevention.
money just kind
Well,
of popped out of the ground?
I would
and
say
said, do something.
prevention, because once somebody becomes homeless, the cost of getting them rehoused is so enormous. So the council has supported that in the past. We're using some ARA funds for that right now, federal funds. But to me, the best bang for the buck is, because so often a household has an emergency that's like a one-time thing that, they have to move and they don't have the deposit, or they don't have this month's rent because they got their hours cut, or their car broke down, or something happened, and they got this one-time crisis, and for the lack of $500, they can remain housed and stabilized. But once they become on the streets, it dramatically changes everything. It's so costly to try to repair that. So that's where the best bang is. The long term, the best bang, obviously, is getting people into permanent housing.
Right.
That they can afford.
Okay. Thank you.
Eddie?
Hope that's helpful.
Yeah, I did.
One of my questions was answered, I think. I was going to ask, did you count the people who are living with relatives? And I think Pearl partly answered
The
that.
answer is we did count people who were doubled up, especially in schools. We had over 900 students plus their family members. We did get doubled up figures.
So I do know that there are people who are crowded into other people's
So those who have
houses.
children in the schools were counted, but those who not
And
with children.
has there been any effort to ask eWeb to help those people who are taking in other people with their utility bills? That's a big way that people become homeless is, one of the big ways, is they can't pay their utility bill, the utilities are cut off, then you have to pay a huge amount to get reconnected, which means you can't pay your mortgage and everything.
What I'll say to that is, we have really good energy assistance programs, and in terms of assistance to the low income, my understanding is that of all the power companies in the area, eWeb is by far the most proactive at helping people who are low income.
I know they're doing a lot, but if you have 6 extra people move into your house and your bills go up, maybe you aren't low income, but you can't afford to pay the bill anymore.
Well, your income would be based on the number, your family size, household size would change at that point for the calculation for energy
Okay,
assistance.
and then I really think, I don't think we could ever have enough permanent housing. I really think there should be shelters, and I know you don't agree with that, but I think shelters for temporary housing are a lot better than being outside. I also think we need single-room occupancy housing. I noticed that Junction City has a place now, and there are people who maybe could afford a room who couldn't afford an apartment. And any place, any kind of shelter is better than sleeping out in the rain, I think. I remember saying when the Sears building was still where the pit is, I suggested we let people sleep in that, and people were very indignant because they said it wasn't suitable, it wasn't safe, it wasn't whatever, but I still think places like that are empty could be used for shelters. I would rather be under just an overhang than to be out on the ground. Yes.
I'll just say it's a policy decision about how to spend dollars, and that's why we have a Housing Policy Board and Human Services Commission and others to determine whether, I mean, I'm not opposed to shelters, obviously. It's just a matter of priorities.
You could take care of a lot more people that way. Thank you. That's all.
So we need to transition in about the next 3 minutes. I have 3 people in queue, so I'm just going to ask you to be as quick as you possibly can.
Sure.
Mike?
I agree with the mayor that you can't begin to solve this, and we can't address it effectively without good information, and that's why I appreciate the count very much and appreciate the work that you do here. So that these kind of statistics, I think, are very helpful to that. I think that sometimes at this table we end up in kind of circular discussions at times based in a lack of some kinds of data. And so I'm wondering, I noticed that you have here that 95% of local homeless households list their last permanent address as Lane County. Do you ask them how many are Eugene versus Springfield versus somewhere else?
I think we do get that, but I don't have the detail on that.
But you do ask that question, or no?
I think We asked them where their last
Okay.
permanent address was, and yes, because I did the homeless count.
Right.
And there is like Eugene, Springfield, Lane County, other, so it was, yes.
Do you ask them how long they have been in Lane County?
Got to think about that. We asked them how long they've been homeless, but I don't know if we asked them how long they've been in Lane County. But
We present this information as residents of Lane County, and that's good, but I think it's, at least for me, it's an important part of the discussion to know how long have they been residents of Lane County? So did you ask that at all?
I don't remember that question being asked.
could find it out
But
and get back.
it might be, we can find out and get back to you, okay? That'd be better, because... I'm
But
not
you don't
sure.
remember that you asked that?
Well, there's two parts to this. One is, that data is collected regularly by social service agencies, and it's fed into a system called Opus, which is a counting system. And I don't remember what questions they ask in their form. I know what was asked on the one-night homeless count form, which is not the same necessarily. So, how long you've lived in Lane County was not on that form, but it might be information that's in the system. I just don't know.
Okay, and
I
lastly
don't want to
then,
lie to you. I don't know.
lastly then, this is wonderful at this time of year, but I think we've talked about the nature of this issue, and I appreciate Chris's point about the difference between the condition and behavior parts of this. We see more behavior issues that are troubling in the summertime. Why is it that we don't do the count in the
Federal
summertime?
requirement.
Federal requirement.
Federal law.
Everywhere in the country does it the same night. It would have been logical if they would have done it at the same time as the census this year, but no.
I think that would give
Want to
us...
make a motion to do it twice?
Well, I actually might, because I think that would give us information that would
I'll
be
second
helpful
it.
to the discussion, so...
Ooh, I think we're going to want
We need
more
the price
discussion
tag
Thank you.
first before we-
Okay, Alan, and then Andrea.
Well, Pearl left. I just wanted to actually, two people in particular stand out for me a lot, and Richie Wyman is one of them, and Pearl Wolf is the other. These two people put their heart and souls out, and they're some of the best in the country at what they do, and they get recognized as such, and we should recognize them as well. So thank you, Richie.
That's true.
We do. Andrea?
I just had one quick comment, Mayor. I appreciate Richie's comments about the leadership at this table. We're here today, but this kind of conversation started way back before we got here, and so I really think it's the city as a whole, as an organization, who feels that this is an important
I agree.
thing that we are a part of. And so, I think it was in the 60s when they started discussing this, and that was way before my time. But, I believe we're just here on the coattails of others.
And as we wrap this up, I guess I would just say that, and we say this often, just as many of the things we've said here, we say often, but one of them is people who are homeless are as varied as any other part of the population and have as many different reasons for where they are as the rest of the population. They are no different than the rest of us. They just have become homeless. And then the second thing that I want to say is, for many people, the thing you're going to be doing on Friday is going to be the best thing you can do, and that is the economic development discussion, where we try to provide, find ways to provide good-paying jobs for the families of our community. Because the best way for people to get to housing is for us not to have to get them there. They can get there themselves. That is the best possible way. We are only the back stop when things have gone wrong. The best thing that we can do is provide a situation where people can take care of their own families and pay taxes and help build our community up for everyone. So with that, thank you all very, very much. Appreciate the discussion. Okay. Issue number 2.
They moved. I didn't know that.
Hey, Richie?
Asking about statistics.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
It's from the food stamp.
Okay, Jason. So here we are. I don't know which chapter this is. Chapter. How many meetings have we had? I know, we're in the middle of the book here. I think that's right. We're in the middle of the book, right? We've been through a lot of chapters on the Eugene Comprehensive Land Assessment, which really could be said, where are we going? And so we've done a lot of careful preparation and come to some agreement. And now we're ready for the sort of moving toward the meatier part of the conversation. So a lot of work to do together. And I will turn this over to City Manager.
Thanks, Mayor, and given our time, I'll just turn over to Lisa and we can get going.
Great. Good afternoon,
Mayor and Council. You know, the same thing happened when Jason and I went to the school board. The room cleared just before our item.
Scintillating conversation.
They were talking about kindergarten at Buena Vista, and it was much more interesting to everybody in the room than the land assessment process.
That might be a good thing.
I know. We actually we didn't complain. So, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm Lisa Gardner with the Planning Division. Jason Dedrick and I are here today to talk to you both about sort of the last chapter of one book that we've been working on and the beginning chapter of the next book that we're talking about in the conversation of growth in our community. I have a really short PowerPoint to go through. Jason, are you driving?
Yeah.
The first thing I want to talk to you today is giving you an update on the Eugene Comprehensive Lands Assessment process, talk about the outstanding issues very briefly. Then I want to transition to talk about Envision Eugene and the timeline for that process and project, and that's really the next book that you're going to be asked to read carefully and participate in a discussion group. And then talk a little bit about Chadwick sessions that we've been working on as part of the process and undertaking that next piece. So on the comprehensive lands assessment, we have, since council direction, well, just to back up a little bit, and particularly for people watching this, over the past year, the council has been receiving updates on and working through a number of issues around House Bill 3337, which requires that Eugene conduct a land assessment process for residential lands and determine a Eugene-only urban growth boundary. Council direction, we included both commercial and industrial lands in addition to residential, and also public and semi-public lands. In December, Council accepted a draft of the land need for 20 years, accommodating the 20-year growth for residential and commercial industrial in our community, but also directed staff to continue working through the outstanding issues that had yet to be resolved through the Community Advisory Committee process, and significantly to complete the establishment of the urban growth boundary by February 2010. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. In your packet is a matrix of outstanding issues around the land need, and really we weren't intending to go through issue by issue, although Jason's here and we can certainly do that at your pleasure. Message to you is that we are working through those. We have both the Community Advisory Committee being convened as a group and also in breakout groups, smaller working groups, bringing in additional people and expertise as needed to resolve those issues, and we are on task to be back in April and complete that and ask for your approval on that action. So I'd like to move on to talk about Envision Eugene, and at your places there is a timeline that's a little bit easier to see probably than that. I wanted you to have the sort of visual representation of the overall project timeline. The process that we are working on, concurrent to completing the 3337 part, is called Envision Eugene. I want to walk through both the timeline and the project management plan overview that we've developed to meet that timeline that you've given us of February 2011. The project is organized into 5 primary project elements, and I really just wanted to hit them at a very high level. If you have questions, I can do my best to answer them, but we're really still in the project development phase of organizing these teams. And so the points that I want to convey to you today are that the project's organized into these 5 elements and that there's components and times associated with those. So the 5 elements are the technical analysis, and that's where we start to look at things like efficiency measures for land use, otherwise known as infill, and using our land efficiently as possible. State statute requires that we do that first. Then, if needed, we would look at expansion areas to figure out how could we accommodate that 20-year need. We have, second in the green section, the design and implementation. And that's significant because one of the things we're really trying to accomplish in this process is to create the most accessible planning process or community visioning process that we can, to not rely on data and spreadsheets and colored designations on a map for people to interpret what something looks like as it becomes a reality and implemented in our community. So we have been working to build a design element to our staff and to be able to bring, as we talk about various densities or certain kinds of land types, that we actually illustrate them as we go out and have these community conversations, so that for some person, when you talk about commercial, it might mean a Walmart. For another person, commercial means Friendly Street shop or the Keep or something like that, very different. And so wanting to make sure that we use as many visual tools as we can. A picture we know is worth 1,000 words, and we want to make sure that we are using fewer words and more images and visuals to convey the vision. Public involvement, obviously a key component that happens throughout the process, and I'll be talking a little bit more about our approach on that in a minute. And then partnership building, which of course is a part of community involvement, but really it's a deeper level, the community conversations and trying to find new partnerships and new ways of approaching this problems that we have to solve as a community. And one of the things I think that we're really focused on is finding a way to have the conversation differently, that we don't start at the outset of this process as a polarized dialogue, that it's either you support an urban growth boundary expansion or that you're resolute against one. And trying to tease out what the values and the vision and the components of what that means to any particular interest group or individual who has an asserted position. And part of it is, we think about how we all have different perspectives and different ways of perceiving things. And so the example I've been talking about the last couple of days is, to one person, this is a silver coffee cup. To somebody else, it's a cup with a red top. It carries hot water, but what it is it's a vessel for liquids, right? And if we all focused on how we individually perceived it and described it, we might think that we were describing something different. But if we focus on what it can accomplish for us and what it is, not just in form and function, but more integrally what it offers us, I think you can find that in having different ways of conversations, you get to a different understanding of each other as a community and of our goals. And so we're trying to pull apart our descriptions and our perceptions and our assessments and get more to the core values. So one of the things, I guess the next one down would be the formal procedures, and that's it's really the legal process, the formal adoption process that goes through Planning Commission process and Council. One of the key points around that is that the legal parameters of this process are very specific, and they fairly narrowly define our scope. And we will be coming to you to bring different pieces of these elements in much more detail as the project moves forward in the coming months. But I think the point to take from today is that we're working very hard to establish those legal parameters and understand them right now at the beginning, because they will shape our decisions. They will shape your decisions. In fact, the criteria that we develop for evaluating efficiency measures and various various elements of our plan will in fact become basis for findings. And so there's a body of land use law that I will not attempt to speak to, but that Emily is very familiar with, and working with our staff and trying to understand today how that informs our technical analysis and our process as we move forward. You'll see on the very bottom there's a number of little dots, represents frequent interaction with you as a body, and all of the work that we have been doing to this point, not just on the comprehensive lands assessment, but on our infill and opportunity siting processes, on our minor code amendment, all the work that we've been building on the last several years really is a starting off point for this work. We're building on that momentum. We're going to continue to move forward. We will need to be working very closely with the council to accomplish the tasks that we have to accomplish over the next year. The plan's a working process. We'll be coming back often to talk to you, communicating project updates through work sessions, through council memos, and also through direct council involvement in some community processes and community conversations. The timeline shows how we as a community can meet this timeline, how we're laying out in these various project elements. What we'll need from council as a community will be focused and targeted involvement and frequent involvement in this iterative process as we move forward. Moving on to the next piece. Actually, I want to move away from the PowerPoint. What I want to talk about are the community conversations, and I guess I want to move away from the PowerPoint because I'm hoping that maybe this is the last PowerPoint we bring to you for a while. We start to have more of a human-scaled conversation as a community, and one of our goals in framing this project is to not have a bureaucratic, wonky process that few people understand, or that you have to have a master's degree in statistics to understand what we're talking about. So as a first approach, we are working with Bob Chadwick, and I mentioned this when we were here in December, and I know you're all very familiar, having worked with him in the past. He has helped us frame an approach, starting with the listening sessions that I know you have been part of in the past, and your work with Bob, I think it was about a year or so ago. Bob met with the planning staff earlier this year, and I think I mentioned when I was here in December that he had met with a group of 46 people from throughout the community, from all over the community, very different backgrounds, people from Human Rights Commission, police staff, people from school districts, and really a broad cross-section. And what's fascinating about the work that Bob does is that there's a core, there are core messages that seem to come up regardless of what your reason for gathering as a group, regardless of what you're trying to accomplish, that as a community, when we start talking and listening to each other, we tend to find that we have a lot more in common. And one of the things that was fascinating to me is going back and reading the best outcomes that came from the group of 47 that Councilor Ortiz participated in and many others, and looking at the ones from the Planning Division, they're very much mirrored. And then in participating, the last couple of weeks, Bob and his associate Diane have been here. We've been meeting with over 50 people so far from a broad cross-section of the community, and we're hearing the same things. And so it's interesting to me. It's a foundation for the work that we're doing. It's not our public involvement process, but it will be an integral part of how we talk to each other. And so over the next several months, we will be working on different scales of using that sort of Chadwickian approach. One-on-one listening sessions. We'll be convening broader groups. Tomorrow evening, we're working with the Jefferson Westside group. We have invitations out to other groups from across all segments of our community. And then we will be trying to bring bigger groups in. In fact, we're going to tap the expertise of the 47 people that took the training in November and try to see, can we bring you in and have you bring the segment of your community that you work with into this dialogue, so that we really we work with people in education, we work with people in social services, and we really think about what is quality of life questions and how does that translate into the vision for our community, and based on that, we'll come to some agreement about what the line around our town looks like. So I think that's really all I wanted to frame for you. Jason's here, can answer the questions about the comprehensive land assessment process, and I'm happy to talk more about what we're working on right now.
Thank you. One of the questions that came to my mind, Lacey, from looking at this was I see in the formal procedures about August, we start having joint Lane County Planning Commission kind of meetings. And my question is, maybe, I don't know how we do this, I'm just putting this out. It seems like you're going to want to have them in the conversation the whole time, for somebody who's helping engage them in what we're doing the whole time, so they end up in the same place we are in the conversation and don't come in too late. I guess that's
absolutely. That's a great point. And back up on that purple section, we talked about the technical analysis. There's actually a section there that runs the entire length of that process, talking about coordinating with partner agencies, and certainly we'll want to get in on the ground level working with Lane County.
Okay. Thanks for that. Mike?
Thank you, Mayor. You, maybe this is a question for Jason, I'm not sure, but there were several pieces, and they're listed here as outstanding issues that the CAC is working through. This was the refinement part. As I look at the timeline here, I see the final product coming back to us in April, but at no point in there is there any kind of time for us to have a further discussion or check-in on issues that some of us brought up. And I'm sure they'll get addressed with the CAC membership, but the issue of drainage ways and how that affects, some of the questions that I had. Before it gets to us as final product, are we going to receive materials, or I don't see us having another check-in on it, so I'm wondering how we will get updated about how that's going.
I think that's certainly the smaller groups are working rapidly, and we basically have 13 outstanding issues, and so we have 13 mini groups that are working, and so the time that it's taking to do that, as you can guess, is we're trying to keep it moving, but it's a timely process. So some of them we're already getting through. Mm-hmm. I think that although we don't have currently scheduled another work session until we come in April, I think we can look at some ways to get some of that information, because some of those issues are already coming to some resolution and will continue to do that. So I think we can look for some ways to feed some of that information to you prior to April.
Well, that'd be great. I mean, speaking strictly from myself, I'd be very interested in knowing not just those points of those 13 issues that come to resolution and when they do, but if there's a sticking point and, may get right to the end before we get an answer, here's what's going on. Just some kind of update so that it's not get to the end and here's all this stuff and then we don't have a real discussion about it at the end.
I think we can do that, and we can do that by memo, and if it becomes apparent that the council needs a conversation prior to the action date, we can look at trying to schedule that.
Okay, thank you.
It sounds, though, to me, though, if there are, I don't know whether you say, are these the questions you have, or you say, I just checking back with you to say these are the things that I'm most concerned about, but maybe just being sure those are there's clarity on the mix of things if any of you have specific things that you really are super important to you, that I think just tying that back together might help the conversations that are going on. So
I gave you a list of the things
So you've
specific
done that.
to me previously, and you have those, right?
Yep.
Okay. I'd love, at least with, I think there were 4, perhaps 5, that I'd love to have some kind of specific check back before we get to April decisions on. Thanks.
that's a good reminder for everyone else if there's something that you have a burning issue about. Now's the time to let people know. Andrew, you next.
I don't have a burning issue. I just have a question about your public process outreach. So have you finished those interviews, and have you interviewed people like in Ward 6, 7, and 8?
So we're really just starting. We will be. And so we have been doing the interviews. This is the second week. Bob and Diane are here all this week, or 3 days this week, and they were here 2 days a week and a half ago. We'll be scheduling more next week, and then we'll be doing a combination of those sort of 1-on-2 where there's 2 listeners and 1 person coming in to talk, and convening broader groups. And so we will be looking at trying to make sure we have a broad representational group. And Bob is actually working with Francisca to see if she can help bring some other people in so that we have a... And actually, when we meet with people, one of the things we ask is there somebody we should be talking to? And so it's kind of, it pays it forward with that broadening our reach. And so the list that we started with, there's some obvious sort of opinion leaders or community assets that we know about that are... We bring some folks in, but we say, who else would you have us talk to? And so we're not generating the list. So in some cases, we asked Kevin Matthews from Friends of Eugene, can you give us a list of folks? We asked Laura Potter from Home Builders, can you give us a list of folks? And so we're going off those lists, but certainly building that.
Well, because this is the kind of conversation that a lot of people probably don't think about getting involved in. And I think that they do have as much vested in the outcome of what this is than the next person. And I think the people that live in other wards might have different ideas. So I just want to make sure that you get that happens, because I just, people view things differently, so.
I really appreciate your mentioning that, and I think one of the things as we're putting together our public involvement plan, and I talked about trying to do it differently and have a different kind of conversation, part of that is finding ways to have people understand the relevancy of this conversation in life, exactly what you just said. And so one of our strategies, it's not, as we all know, we're really busy people. We have families and outside lives, and to think about one more meeting on a Tuesday night to come talk about a land process, for some people it's just not something that they have the capacity to do. But if you find ways of going to where they are, and one of the ways that I certainly know, and as a parent of 2 kids in this town, parents are really involved in their kids' lives, their schoolwork, their extracurricular activities. We want to work really closely with both Bethel and 4J school districts to find out, can we get in on the curriculum? Can we do some interesting ways of hooking people in? We're trying to do a youth component in our outreach. We talked about doing videos where we give somebody a camera in the high school or middle school, and you say, tell us what quality of life looks like to you, or what do you think about when you think about these growth issues, and trying to find different ways of getting people involved. And so we're trying to be creative, and really I think the point is, how do you hook people to understand that this isn't just another land use issue that has no relevance to their life. It really affects everybody's quality of life.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Alan?
I've talked about my experience with forecasting and this kind of planning in the energy arena, and the jaws of uncertainty about we don't know where we're heading. So, and we didn't want to make permanent decisions that will in all likelihood be wrong based on straight line ruler mentality. And so their fix to this whole thing was to incorporate flexibility into the plan that can respond over time to different needs that we find ourselves on, or different paths that we find ourselves on. And I'd like to try to apply that here. And I talked to the chair of LCDC, John Van Nindingham, and I asked him, if we brought you a plan that incorporated this kind of flexibility, that wasn't just based on straight line ruler mentality, but had triggers in it that allowed us to respond by doing different things over time, depending on which path that we were on, whether we're on the high path or the low path, rather than just taking this snapshot approach, making permanent decisions that we know will probably end up being wrong. Would that be something that would be acceptable to LCDC? And he said, absolutely. In fact, that's what they're trying to encourage people to do. So I would like to see us try to do that in this plan. As well as not trying to couch this as you either want the urban growth boundary to get blown out or you're resolute against it. I think having a plan that incorporates flexibility and triggers allows us to move forward and see where we're going and still be in compliance with the law and with the amount of land that we need over the long term. So I'd like to meet with you guys and figure out how to actually frame that. And he mentioned that Portland was doing something similar. So I was very encouraged by that, because I think that path is a way of having this conversation and getting to a result that doesn't end up being a very divisive debate, but still gets us where we need to go.
Okay, George Brown?
Thanks. I just got a question about the Chadwick sessions, a couple questions. Will we be able to see the material, see all those interviews and the work sessions and everything?
Well,
with the different groups?
right. So I think we'll have a couple.
It'll be like a précis or a summary.
Typically, the sort of one-on-ones don't get written up in a summary, in a sort of recorded fashion, but maybe observations or things that you pull from commonalities themes that you come up with. As we start to bring groups together, we'll go through processes where we actually do the best outcomes, and we'll be recording sort of word for word as you guys have experienced. And those kinds of things, yes, will be brought forward as reports. And we hope that you'll be participating in some of those. That's our goal, is to bring the council into some of those community conversations.
Okay. How much is all that going to cost? Rough ballpark figure?
You know, we haven't done the full budget for all that. We're working on sort of trying to do things as incrementally as we can on this. And one of the principles of working with Bob Chadwick is that you don't need him to solve your community's conflicts. He helps build an approach. So we're going to spend some intensive time with him up front, getting our staff trained, working with the community, and increasing the sort of trust and credibility in the process. And then we're going to be working at ourselves as we go forward. So it's not, I don't think we'll have spent a couple $1,000s before this month is over. It's the scale of it for what we're working on is a very small investment, and it's an investment in a skill and an approach that we'll be implementing.
Okay, yeah, I don't mean to be critical of the sessions or of Bob or of his method or anything like that. I just want to know how much it's going to cost us. That's all. Okay. So at some point, I'd like to know what the total. I think we should know what the total is. Fair enough.
I can certainly share the project's budget and scope and timeline once we have it more fully developed.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like
Absolutely.
to see that. Thank you.
Betty?
Okay. First question, Mike mentioned action in April. What are we going to take action on in April?
So recall in December, you accepted the draft land need because
Yeah.
there were so many outstanding issues. We were not in a position to ask for council action at that time. So in April, following the resolution of all those outstanding issues, you'll be asked to formally accept that land need.
That's this coming April.
This April.
That is not very long.
No, just a couple, 3 months away.
And that was council direction. Yeah,
No.
specific direction.
Right. The specific direction was to not do that in December, to postpone that to April, but then to have a very
Then
clear
what kind of action will
deadline.
we take then? We will accept
you will be accepting the land need for 20 years in Eugene. I don't know the specific language, and I don't want to put Emily on the spot, but she is right there.
It won't be an adoption. The way state law works is that you will adopt the land need at the same time you've found ways to accommodate it. But it will be, I think, a benchmark in the process. You really can't move forward with meeting the need until you know what the need is. So in April, staff will come to you and say, here's what we think it is. This is what we're going to work with. Can we work with this number? And you will be asked to accept the studies that show that. You will see them again for adoption at the end of the process.
By accepting, does that mean we agree with it?
Not necessarily. I mean, no, you can accept that it's good work and that you accept that this is the product the city should move forward with. Doesn't mean you necessarily like it.
And another question, I guess there isn't time to do this, but I would hope you'd be trying to go to every neighborhood organization.
Absolutely. In fact, that's one of the things that we're trying to do with the listening sessions is engage every single neighborhood and do a process with each one of them. So that's what we're going to start working on the next month.
And I would hope you would go with some lists of things that will be affected by this. For example, food security, open space, carbon footprint, and those as things to discuss, and other things that may come up from the neighborhood.
One of the things that I didn't mention, let's see if I can find it, was we're working on a set of guiding principles, and the guiding principles are being pulled together based on some existing policy documents, growth management policies, council goals, info compatibility and opportunity citing principles, Eugene counts, our metro plan policies. And so the 6 guiding principles that we've developed as a draft right now, but really to help frame this conversation, are safe and healthy community, housing and transportation choices, sustainable futures, using land efficiently, vibrant economy, and enhancing community character and identity. So we're not creating new things, and I mentioned earlier that we are building on the tremendous amount of work that our community has already done on many different topics in the last several years. That's how we're going to move forward. We're going to take those products and that good work and build that momentum to getting to this place in February where we need to be next year. So those are the 6 principles that we have distilled down from the essential policies that our council has focused on and that our community has come up with. So we'll be giving more information around those as we go talk to neighborhoods.
Okay, the principles are fine, but I'm thinking of things like food security, for example, is a really important thing. What does that mean, and what does expansion mean to that?
And I think that will be part of the dialogues we talk about land.
I'm suggesting that you bring this up instead of waiting for people to, that you mention specific things when you go to a neighborhood that might be affected.
Mm-hmm.
Because the principles are kind of vague. They're to people who just came to a neighborhood meeting, they might prefer to talk about something that they can see will affect their lives instead of some big principles which will affect their lives. But it's, as you said, they're coming from home with their kids, and they have kids at home, they have a lot of other things to think about, and they won't want to spend a lot of time studying this. Okay, thank you.
Chris?
Thanks. Actually, I'm kind of following up on a point Alan was making about the notion of building flexibility into it. I know it's been very popular within the corporate world to do scenario planning because nobody knows what the future holds. And the worst thing you can do is say this one path is what the future will be, and then it winds up not being that way, like the economy melts down or something happens you didn't anticipate. At the same time, I recognize there are portions of this that will probably need to be a number that's our best guess. The reaction to that then is the part where I'm hoping we can build flexibility. What do we do with that, or what happens if that gets changed? Scenario, or maybe the idea would be maybe not so much a plan as an algorithm.